What do you want to be?
Engineer.
Engineer. What do you want to be?
Software engineer.
Software engineer. What do you want to be?
Indian Foreign Service.
Indian Foreign Service. What do you want to be?
I want to be a doctor.
You want to be a doctor. Great. What do you want to be?
I want to be a doctor.
You want to be a doctor. And how about you? What do you want to be?
I want to civil engineer.
Civil engineer.
I want to become a scientist.
You want to be a scientist. What do you want to be?
I want to become a doctor.
You want to be a doctor. What do you want to be?
Engineer. Civil engineer.
Civil engineer. What do you want to be?
I want to become a doctor.
Those are a handful of students who were interviewed by San Diego school teacher Keith Ballard during his recent trips to India and China. Ballard visited more than 20 schools in those countries, and now he's traveling across America talking about what he found and what it will take for American students to become more globally competitive. Joining us now is Keith Ballard, recipient of a 2003 Milken National Educator Award. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
How different, first of all, when you went over there, what were you expecting? What did you find?
Well, I did about 400 hours of research before I went, and I knew it was really good. The thing about it is, once I got there, it was so much better than what I read. But if I can just quickly, the analogy I would use to Americans to describe this is that, let's talk about in terms of football. The Chinese public educational system is so good, it's something like the NFL. Whereas our American public educational system, I got to say, sorry to say, but we're playing no better than high school football.
Okay, with that in mind, why are they the NFL and why are we still high school football?
Well, there's so many reasons, but just to give you an idea, they do approximately 230 days of school per year, and we're doing about 185, maybe 175, depending on where you're at. They do about 3 hours more per day, okay? They start kindergarten at age 2, and we're starting at age 5, and maybe 25% of our kids are started at age 6. So, you know, at the end of what it's going to look like by graduation of high school, they're going to be about 6 years ahead conservatively. Now, listen, I was in 10 schools over in China, K through 12, and 12 over in India. I was in schools up to 4,000 kids. I saw absolutely no discipline problems over there. Never met a disrespectful student. I couldn't say the same thing here in the U.S.
Well, and that brings up an important point, I think, and that is the concept of cultural differences. Can you compare what's happening in China and India? We saw the tape of those kids.
Sure.
Are those American school kids? Do American school kids have that kind of mindset? You mentioned the NFL. It's almost like a boot camp, it sounds like, what's going on over there. Is that what America wants in terms of education?
Well, I don't know if America wants that, but the problem is that business has choices, and business is exercising those choices. And let me tell you, more and more business is going to China and India. So do we have to do it exactly like that? I don't think so. But we're going to have to do it a whole lot better than what we're doing, because I tell you, I work as a public school teacher. You know, I'm in the trenches, and in my opinion, and a lot of teachers' opinion, we're not doing a very good job.
From what you saw over there, what are they learning? Are they learning how to take tests? Are they learning rote memorization? Are they learning to be creative and innovative?
Well, here's one for you. You probably know about the Pisa Test, right? The Program for International Student Assessment. China's Shanghai region just decided to, you know, try their luck at this and see how they were going to do. 24 million kids, and they measure 15-year-olds. And by the way, the Pisa Test is the test that our government says is the #1 determinant to see how our kids are doing in comparison with the rest of the world. China, Shanghai, first in reading, first in math, and first in science. America, 31st in math, 23rd in science, and 17th in reading. Now, real quick, this PISA test not only measures academic learning, but it measures can they apply it? And all the questions are based on application. So according to our government, you know, this is a great way to determine who's going to lead and innovate of the future. And, you know, I talk to a lot of different people, and they say, well, but China's system doesn't promote innovation. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, you know, they don't have any Nobel Prize winners yet. But they're getting there. And don't count China out, because everything that they have going for them says that they're heading that way.
How does America head that way? What do we need to do over here?
Well, we're going to have to increase the school day. I mean, in the lowest amount of in the Asian countries, they're doing about 205 days. So we're going to have to kick it up at least another month. Starting earlier, taking advantage of you know, that early brain stimulation that, you know, by age 4 about 90% of the brain is formed. We're not doing that. So starting earlier, you know, and possibly more school days, more investment, but investment in the right way, because in many cases we kind of throw money into a system that's a bottomless pit.
What about the idea, though, and I can hear some parents already saying, wait a second, I don't want my kid going to school at 2, 3, 4 years. I want my kid to be a kid and then prepare for school.
Okay.
How did you respond to something like that?
And I've heard this argument too. And I'll say the great majority of kids are babysitted in their first 2 years in front of a television. And the American Pediatric Association says absolutely no. 0 television the first 2 years. So if they're in a high stimulating environment and their parents are working with them and they're not out working, great. But at least China, at least these kids are in schools getting, an immense amount of, and I was in some of the kindergartens, and by age 3, they're singing the ABCs. They know it all. It's scary to sit there and watch what's coming down the line.
It sounded like when you were interviewing these kids, what do you want to be? Most of them seem to have a pretty good idea. Very young to have that kind of an idea. And the concept of school to career, we talked a lot about vocational ed and CTE and all those kinds of things on this program. One of the criticisms of that is that I think old thinking for education, let's put it that way, is that you teach a kid how to read, how to write, how to think, so they can choose when they become an adult what they want to do. Do we want a 14, 13, 12-year-old deciding what they want to do with their lives?
Well, here's the other side of it. 50%, we have a 40 to 50% dropout in African Americans and Latinos. And I work in this type of school, I work with very poor kids on the border, so I'm right in the fringe. And I can tell you that if there were vocational programs offered to many of these kids, they would not drop out. So do we let them drop out, or do we give them options? Here's the way I look at it. It's like you don't like spinach, and I'm going to force spinach on you and tell you to eat it in elementary school. And then in junior high, you're eating less. And in high school, I say, eat that spinach, eat that spinach. You're saying, hey, I'm going to walk away. I don't have to eat that spinach. I'm bigger than you now. So that's kind of the analogy, and that's what happens when the kids walk out the door. So if we could offer a broad spectrum of vocational education, as China does, and they do it really well, because I was in those schools, I think we'd be a lot better off.
Do they offer vocational education in order to train a scientist, to train a mechanic, whatever you want to train, or are they, and in Arizona we've got some programs now that are very successful, where yes, you learn how to be a doctor, how to be a mechanic, how to be a scientist, but in learning that you also learn general education principles.
And that's the way their vocational programs are set up. The same way. They're still learning general education, but maybe half day they're learning to be a full-fledged mechanic. The problem with so much vocational education here in the United States generally, and I know there's my understanding is a good vocational program in East Mesa, right?
Yes.
And but generally they're little funding with them, and they don't really prepare kids for anything, and they kind of I used to be at a high school where they gave the auto mechanic, the teacher, $800 a year for a budget, and everything was broken and all the tools were ripped off. So all the kids knew it was a joke, and they quit. But if it's a high-powered program, where a kid doesn't have to spend $40,000 after high school to learn what he could learn in high school, I think it would be a great thing. So,
I got to tell you, ever since I was in school, that's a long time ago, I've heard that the American education system is failing. It's not keeping up with the rest of the world. We're failing our children. Decade after decade, I've heard this, and yet America is simply a powerhouse economically, in terms of the military, in terms of creativity, and has been for decades. It's almost as if now obviously China, India, Brazil, the upstarts of the world are catching up to a certain degree. But if things are so bad, why are we such a powerhouse?
Well, I guess I might disagree with you on that, because if we're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar, I don't call that a powerhouse. If we're 15 to 16 trillion dollars in debt, I don't call that a powerhouse. If we cannot maintain this large military over time if we don't have a robust economy. And in order to really have a robust economy, we're going to have a great educational system which feeds that robust economy, which pays for that. So I look at it as we can't sustain those programs.
Yes or no? Are you encouraged?
I'm encouraged that possibly America may be wanting to listen now. If I was doing this project 5 years ago, I don't think so, but maybe, just maybe, they will listen.
Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.